Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of 2013's The Wolverine, the 6th installment of our X-Men Snicked Rewatch, as we go back through all 13 of the Fox X-Men and Deadpool films ahead of Wolverine's mutant homecoming in Deadpool 3 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. 2 years after Matthew Vaughn took the franchise in his own retro direction with X-Men First Class, James Mangold took up Wolverine's solo series after X-Men Origins, in the years after Jean Grey's death in X-Men The Last Stand, on a solo adventure to Japan that I believe fixed much of what had gone wrong with the character of Wolverine. While Mangold and Jackman would perfect this tone in 2017's Logan, 2013's The Wolverine might be a more critical inflection point for the franchise because it carved its own approach into superhero cinema as a response to the saccharine and sanitized MCU of the time. And I believe this film too often goes overlooked, maybe because it has a pretty goofy third act, but it's still pretty cool overall. So let's break this movie down scene by scene for all the Easter eggs, the details you never spotted, and what from this film could come back in Deadpool 3. And yes, it is Super Bowl weekend, and our reactions and breakdowns to the big trailers will be coming out as soon as possible on this channel. And if you live in the LA area, you have to join us in person to talk about all this stuff at our live show at Braindead Studios in West Hollywood on Thursday, February 15th. Tickets are still available, link in the description. Okay, for this breakdown of the Wolverine, we will be looking at the extended edition, which has a few more F-bombs and lots of brutal violence, but also because it has a pretty wild post-credit scene that gave us lots of fun YouTube thumbnails over the years. Okay, this film opens in Nagasaki in 1945. The day two American B-29s that we see in this opening shot. This is the Boxcar and the Great Artiste. They dropped the Fat Man plutonium bomb over the city, making this August 9th, 1945. Hiroshima had been bombed 3 days prior to this on August 6th, and then on the 9th, the plan was to hit the city of Kokura, but visibility was low, so the planes redirected to Nagasaki. This opening shot of Japan, before we even see the planes, is just meant to contrast with the popular stereotypical imagery of Japan of it being a colorful neon metropolis. James Mangold chose to just open with nature, this beautiful coastline, to just evoke tranquility and hint at one of the many beautiful things that was really lost about those bombings. Because as we learned in the Oppenheimer film, those days and those weapons, in addition to the horrific loss of life they led to, really set humanity on a horrible path. The Japanese soldiers from the watchtower spot the planes, and they would have heard about Hiroshima a few days before this, so they know what is coming. Basically, they are seeing the end of their world. Logan is a POW kept in this well, a deeper prison apart from the other POWs, and he's using his bone claws to hold himself at the top of the well, so this guy was very close to escaping the moment this happened, making it, I guess you could say, kind of unfortunate timing for him. And yes, in addition to the 40,000 Japanese people who were killed in this bombing at Nagasaki, there are actually hundreds of Allied prisoners of war nearby. X-Men Origins established that Logan fought in Europe in World War II, but there were several American soldiers who, after the Germans surrendered in April 1945, redeployed to the Pacific Theater, and Logan must have been one of them. It's not really clear where Victor Creed would be during this time, but we know that they were in Vietnam together sometime after this in the 60s and 70s. Ichiro Yashida releases the POWs to give them a chance to survive, and he even signals the other soldiers not to shoot at them. And he tries to get Logan to run.
That was a B-29, Bob. There's no outrunning what's coming.
So I guess Logan must have heard about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, because it's not like he would have known about the Manhattan Project, but I just kind of love this line as a stated theme early in the movie. There's no outrunning what's coming. It's such a good, like, James Mangold Western line, you know? 3 other soldiers commit seppuku, that's suicide by stabbing oneself in the abdomen with a shorter blade that would be kept behind their backs. Yeah, suicide before moments of atomic hellfire? What a way to open a Marvel movie! This script was written by Mark Baumbach and Scott Frank, but Christopher McQuarrie wrote the first draft, and McQuarrie loves to open movies with nukes. Remember, that's how Mission Impossible Fallout opened. Well, like in a dream sequence and then through like a Wolf Blitzer fake out. Darren Aronofsky was actually originally set to direct this film. He also worked on the script for 6 months, but he couldn't come to terms with Fox over whether the movie would be rated R or PG-13, so James Mangold took over after having proven himself as a director of films like Walk the Line, 3:10 to Yuma, and Night and Day, but he had actually worked with Hugh Jackman and Liev Schreiber in the 2001 time travel rom-com Kate and Leopold, which actually has one of the trippiest time travel conceits that I've ever seen in an off-genre movie. I highly recommend it. But opening this film with Logan stopping Yashida's seppuku is important, because by the end of the film, he will kind of reverse his own death via a blade to the stomach by pulling it out and healing when he decides that he wants to live. Notice that the Fat Man bomb detonates above the city, as these bombs actually did. They were timed to detonate before they hit the ground to cause maximum radial impact. And horrifyingly, we hear the screams of the people. Now, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer was actually criticized by directors like Spike Lee for not showing the devastation of these bombings, but in fairness, we already got a pretty horrific look at it in movies like this. And really the whole point of Oppenheimer was to confine that dread and that guilt within the mind of one man, the inventor of the weapon. Logan, meanwhile, is designed to be a witness to our full military history, kind of like Forrest Gump. Logan stops Yashida from stabbing himself just in time, but in a way you could see dooming him to seeing the horror of the aftermath of the bomb and setting his own history on a different trajectory than it would have been. But they flee back into the well, and Logan shields him with what I assume is a lead lid. It's kind of like Indiana Jones surviving the atomic bomb in a fridge, but you know, it looks way cooler. And I love this detail of how a cut in this metal exposes Yashida's cheek to the burns, but Logan is completely cooked. Yet his skin heals, and his hair and his chops grow back exactly as they were before. This would be Hugh Jackman's 6th time playing the character, and he's more ripped than ever. Apparently he asked Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for advice on bulking up. Johnson told him that he could gain a pound a week over 6 months by eating 6,000 calories a day. So RIP Hugh Jackman's booty hole. The Rock told him that he should stick to, quote, an awful lot of chicken, steak, and brown rice. So Jackman is insanely jacked in this movie, and with his pants somehow not burning off in this, our man is kind of like the Hulk here. Yashida tries to run, but Logan stops him, saying it's still not safe, which tells us that he must feel the radiation pummeling his flesh. Because again, he wouldn't know the details of the Manhattan Project. No one knew what radiation was at that point. It means he must feel it viscerally, kind of like the snicks going through his knuckle skin. It hurts every time. So Logan wakes up next to Jean Grey, Famke Janssen returning to play the spectral ghost version of Jean Grey who haunts Logan throughout the movie. The present day of this film is set after Logan killed Jean to stop Phoenix on Alcatraz in The Last Stand. James Mangold said that this film was originally going to be a prequel to the first X-Men, but he didn't want the burden of handing the film off to a film that already exists. But this is also a dream. Logan wakes up from this nightmare of Jean dying and his claws are out, which we saw in the first X-Men when he stabbed Rogue after waking up from a nightmare, and in X-Men Origins when he scratched Silver Fox while waking up from a nightmare. Yeah, this guy needs to sleep in his own room. But this whole idea of Logan waking up in his bed disoriented, this is gonna come back as a recurring visual in Days of Future Past as his consciousness is displacing through time. So I think we're seeing the seeds of that disorientation planted right here. Logan has isolated himself in the woods, and there's empty booze bottles around him, including Stanley's whiskey, which is likely a nod to Stan Lee after we got a Stanley's Pizza in the 2008 Incredible Hulk film. Logan also has a portable radio, the same one that was in his dream, and photos of Jean Grey that he keeps in a box. The song playing on the radio here is Requiem in D minor, K by Mozart. Mozart was also playing during Nightcrawler's White House attack scene in X2, and Mozart was playing in Eric Lenscher's Plastic Prison Cell in the same film. We see how Logan has marked some trees with his claws to find his way back to town, I assume, but James Mangold described this as a game between him and this grizzly bear that walks by, each of them marking trees with their claws and marking their territory in different ways and having this kind of mutual respect for each other. X-Men Origins kind of play with this theme of Logan being seen as either a man or an animal, and in a way, you could say he's more human when he's just living in this state of nature. In the X-Men comics, there is a Russian mutant named Mikhail Ursus, aka Ursa Major, who turns into a Russian brown bear, but this is a North American grizzly. Logan goes into town to get some batteries for his radio and notices these douchey camo bros who are gearing up for a hunting trip. Meanwhile, he's being filmed by Yukio, played by Rila Fukushima, who had been playing Katana on Arrow, but a different Yukio would be played by Shioli Kutsuna in Deadpool 2. In the comics, Yukio is not a mutant, she's just an extremely skilled ninja / Ronin, and her power in this movie is the ability to see the future, or at least see the deaths of people, which is an interesting distinction, right? She has this kind of fatalist mindset. In the comics, though, there are other mutants who can see the future, like Destiny is a precog, as is Negasonic Teenage Warhead, at least in the comics, although her power set was changed for the Deadpool film. Negasonic Teenage Warhead would often foresee disasters, which is pretty similar to the exact form of Yukio's ability here. Now, Yukio was originally meant to be a love interest for Storm in the comics, but that aspect of her relationship was scrapped because Marvel Comics editor-in-chief at the time, Jim Shooter, I guess didn't want same-sex couples. Ooh. But Logan later finds a grizzly shot by a poison arrow, foreshadowing the use of poison arrows later in this plot. Logan puts the creature out of its misery. This moment highlights a curse that Logan thinks he has, that everyone he gets close to will die. He has to kill the bear, just like how he had to kill Jean, and even here in isolation, this curse finds him. He goes to hunt down the guys responsible, and it's interesting to hear how much Hugh Jackman's voice has changed since the first film. He said that he would shout himself hoarse to get into character, and you can actually hear that in his vocal cords here.
You actually go outside in these things? You're the one who was attacked by the grizzly?
But remember, in addition to this film coming out after phase 1 of the MCU, the Wolverine also came out after Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and it's kind of hard not to see everyone try to do what Christian Bale was doing as his take on Batman in those movies. Everyone has to talk like this now! Mangold and Jackman said that they looked to the movie movie The Outlaw Josie Wales to figure out a more minimalistic Logan, less verbal, less quippy than the ultra cool cigar chomping anti-hero from the X-Men movies past, but it does have a cigar later in this movie. And here, by putting Logan in a bar fight, we are reminded of his badass intro in the 2000 film when it was just kind of a simpler take on the character. Yet here it is even more violent. In fact, so violent, it kind of echoes Magneto hunting down those Nazis in the Argentina bar and making them pay for their crimes. But this is just like messy. When Logan spears the guy's hand with the arrow, the guy smashes him with a bottle. So Logan has definitely lost a step in his depression cloud. No way X1 or X2 Logan will let himself be touched. Yukio intervenes, explaining her sword's origin and its name translating to the Separator. And before they can blink, this sword separates their stools and bottles and the shit from their booty holes, probably.
Like so.
And I love how everything just falls perfectly timed with the sword dropping into the sheet. It's so great. So Yukio shares her file on Logan, which includes production stills from X-Men The Last Stand. Like this shot with Patrick Stewart Charles, kind of looks like it's from the scene where they walked up to Jean Grey's house, and then we see Halle Berry Storm with the shorter haircut that she got specifically for The Last Stand. And you can see some printed text around the Storm photo, a mention of someone named Klein and experiments, and then CIA's to something. I'm not sure, but this could be a nod to Charles's history with the CIA that kind of got defined in X-Men First Class. But beneath the photo, the text reads, "Programmed to influence and control human behavior through drugs such as 90Y and mescaline and other chemical, biological something," which could refer to experiments Stryker put mutants through in Weapons Plus, or some other creepy CIA plot to like control the population. Also, it might be coincidental, but 23 was written on the corner of this page, which could be a clue foreshadowing X-23 Laura in the follow-up film, at least a follow-up film to this solo Wolverine series 2017's Logan, as X-23 would be one of Wolverine's clones. So Logan boards Yukio's private jet, and we get another glimpse of his flight anxiety, which we saw in X-Men Origins. He asks the future reading Yukio if he dies on this plane, and she says, no, not on this plane. And I don't know if we're meant to like read into that. And I'm pretty sure she's just messing with him here, saying like, oh, not this plane, but you should still have flight anxiety. But when I first saw this, I was like, one day it will be a plane that goes down. Anyway, to Tokyo! On the X-Men Origins DVD, there was actually an alternate post-credit scene to that movie that showed Logan drinking in Japan, and he tells the bartender that he's, quote, drinking to remember. That scene was supposed to lead into this film, but it's never really made clear in this movie how Logan still has memories of Yashida or some of the other stuff that comes up, since at this point Stryker's adamantium bullet from X-Men Origins should have still like wiped out a lot of his memory. But I think it kind of speaks to the resiliency of Loki's regenerative memory, or perhaps after the events of X1, X2, and X3, Logan's broken memory has just finally begun to heal. We learn that Yashida helped rebuild the country of Japan after World War II, and now he leads a key technology company. It's just an example of how Logan's actions have some positive consequences that he doesn't always realize, kind of like Forrest Gump. At Yashida's compound, the security team's metal detector wands go crazy on Logan, reminding us of the metal detector on Liberty Island in X1. Yashida's son, Shingen, is played by Hiroyuki Sanada, one of the best actors. He's been in stuff like Lost, he played Scorpion in Mortal Kombat, he was in Westworld, and yes, he was even briefly in Avengers Endgame as one of the guys Hawkeye kills during the blip. Criminal underuse of how talented this guy is as a fighter. In the comics, Shingen is a master fighter. He once poisoned Wolverine, and his knowledge of the human body let him attack Wolverine's nerve endings, which threatened to kill him. Logan asks Yukio what happened to her badass and boots look, and she responds,
Master Yashida is traditional. One eye on the past, and the other on the future.
We see this exemplified in his room. It's a very traditional Japanese building, but all of the medical equipment is state-of-the-art high-tech, and it foreshadows exactly what Yashida is doing, building a future high-tech adamantium supersuit that is molded to look like a throwback to Japanese history. Yashida's granddaughter Mariko is played by Tao Akamoto, a Japanese actress and model who is also in Westworld and Batman v Superman. Logan gets a scrub down and a shave, and he meets Yashida. Logan is the only one not wearing a mask in this scene. It's probably because his healing ability makes him impervious to getting sick, and therefore he can't be a germ carrier. At least I'm sure that's what he said when he was indoors during COVID. Now, Yashida's pin bed is awesome. It's inspired by a pin impression device that Mangold would see in children's museums. I can't imagine this would be very comfortable, even if his weight was evenly distributed across these rods, but it could have a kind of acupuncture effect. Like, it could be designed to adapt to Yashida's frail body, sensing pain as it shifts throughout the body and just kind of responding in real time. Whatever, it looks awesome. The doctor is Dr. Green, aka Viper. Viper also goes by Madam Hydra in the comics and started as a Captain America villain and member of Hydra. She later came into conflict with the X-Men when she tried to poison Mariko. At one point, she also blackmailed Wolverine into marrying her. Comics are crazy. This role was initially offered to Jessica Biel, but they couldn't reach a deal, so she's played in this movie by Svetlana Kodchenkova. And notice how Logan clocks the little robot parasites in the jar that will later go in his body, so Chekhov's robot parasites. This painting on the wall in the room shows a samurai battle. It foreshadows the conflict of the Yakuza throughout this film. It could be depicting the warring states period of Japan from 1467 to 1650, when various states were all vying for for power. Many famous samurai and ninja come from this time period, and the whole idea of warrior clans fighting for power definitely parallels the plot of this film. Yashida says that the painting is from the village of his birth and depicts the bravery and skill of the Black Clan. In the comics, this is a ninja clan that similarly were sworn to serve Shingen, and we'll see the Black Clan coming back later in this film. In the town, Yashida offers to make Logan mortal, saying that there is a way he can transfer his ability to heal over to him. It's such an interesting offer that Logan, of course, turns down because it's crazy, but I always wonder if Yashida thinks that Logan might have accepted that initial offer. Like, he must imagine that Logan has been walking this earth for the past 80 years, feeling this kind of weight, this dread, the pain of immortality. And we as an audience wonder, hey, is this something that might actually be good for Logan? It's a question that will later get answered in 2017's film Logan. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. We've all got goals, better work-life balance, stress management, being more optimistic, but figuring out how to tackle big goals like that on your own can be difficult. Connecting with a licensed therapist through BetterHelp can help. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier and less intimidating for a lot of people. The right therapist for you might not be in your area, and some people struggle with the face-to-face interaction of therapy. With BetterHelp, you can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even via instant message, whatever's the most comfortable version for you. BetterHelp has over 30,000 therapists in their network to choose from. To get started, you simply fill out the questionnaire that will ask you about what challenges you're going through and what kind of therapist you'd like. Then BetterHelp will match you with a therapist, and in most cases, it'll take less than 48 hours. Schedule therapy sessions at a time that's convenient for you, and if for any reason you feel like your therapist is not a great fit, you can switch therapists with a click of the button at no additional cost. Join over 4 million people who have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/newrockstars. Clicking that link helps support this channel, and it gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. Mariko and her father argue, and it's interesting that when Logan is listening to this argument, there are not subtitles to the Japanese that's being spoken, so the audience at this point knows exactly as much as he does. As Logan sleeps, the steam of the tea has this greenish color to it, of course foreshadowing Viper's poison. The same green steam escapes his mouth after she kisses him, after Logan sees her as Jean in his dream, and we're reminded of when Mystique pretended to be Jean Grey in the tent in X2. In Uncanny X-Men 172, which this is partially based on, Viper did attempt to poison Wolverine with tea, but he discovered the ruse in time. James Mangold would come back to this idea of poisoning, weakening Wolverine throughout the Logan film. In that movie, Logan was dying from adamantium poisoning. Yukio reports to Logan that Yashida is dead, but she did not foresee it. I wonder why. At Yashida's funeral, the man on the roof keeping an eye out is Keniucho Harada, who in the comics was the Silver Samurai and illegitimate son of Shingen. Here he was Yashida's bodyguard and now pledges himself to protect Mariko. Mariko's scummy fiance is Noboru Omori, the Minister of Justice. Her father had arranged this union. This character is based on Noboru Hideki in the comics, and Hideki was a criminal associate of Shingen who is Mariko's fiance. And similarly in the comics, Mariko felt duty-bound to marry him even though he beat her. Hideki was eventually killed by Yukio after he had taken Mariko hostage in Wolverine #4. Yukio points out the decorative silver samurai armor that flanks the casket, and she says it will watch over her father forever, of course foreshadowing the other real silver samurai armor that awaits us in the final act, protecting Yashida in a more literal way. Logan notices the arm tattoos of these monks and realizes something is up, and he takes a shotgun blast straight to the chest, whereas we've seen him barely bat an eye when this kind of thing happens to him before. Now Viper's toxin is taking a toll. The Yakuza try to kidnap Mariko, and Logan pursues, while Harada provides some cover with some impressive archery skills. Viper is just filming Logan with her phone, and we remember in 2013, this is like one of the first Marvel films where they actually use smartphones. But when Viper gets held at gunpoint, her powers come out. She licks him with a serpent tongue, causing chemicals to burn his flesh, and then just goes right back to filming. Now, in Logan's opening scene, we will see more of Logan in a weakened state, but already here, you can tell this is the version of Wolverine that James Mangold is most interested to explore. When Logan actually bleeds and feels the impact of the attacks and has to rely on others to help him, that is a version of Logan that we connect with. Like when he defied gravity to fastball special himself into a helicopter and then slow walk away from that explosion, it just kind of felt artificial. Now, they had to shoot a lot of this foot chase guerrilla style. Mangold explained that there wasn't much of a Japanese film commission to help filmmakers shut down streets and locations for productions, so Mangold and his crew just kind of drove around Tokyo in a van, saw places that looked good, and just had the actors run out as they were being chased. Many of the Tokyo pedestrians seen in this sequence are just regular folks, but that couldn't have been the case for these gamblers in the casino because guns fire in this place and Logan stabs the Yakuza through the door and most of them never look up from their slot machines. So presumably the gunfire shots would just be added in post-production, so who knows? These might have been actual gamblers who just didn't care that they were shooting the scene here. Logan follows Mariko on the bullet train, and Mangold gives us this smart moment of Logan nursing his bloody wounds in the bathroom. It's super bloody, and it makes his fight with the Yakuza after this even more gripping because we know what this guy is feeling. This high-speed fight on the sides and on the roof of the bullet train completely rocks. I love the detail that Logan knows to dodge the coming overhangs by watching the other guy's reaction and responding to that reaction, but then later when their positions are reversed, Logan uses this same trick on the guy by jumping prematurely and causing that guy to get clotheslined. And watching Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse 10 years after this, the pursuit with Miguel O'Hara and Miles Morales atop that train with Miguel's claws going into that metal definitely echoes the imagery of this scene. Logan and Mariko check into a love hotel, into the Mission to Mars room, but it's another lady in deep space that Logan is hallucinating, the ghost of Jean, and she tells him,
"Just let it go. It's not hard to die. Come to me."
So now they have Famke Janssen wearing a nightgown, and it kind of looks like her hair is somewhat affected by the rain. Hey, wait a minute, didn't Forrest Gump see ghosts of Jenny and share moments with her in the rain? I'm sorry folks, I had to find a third time. I swear I'm done with the Forrest Gump references. But Hugh Jackman said that a major theme of this movie is Logan being surrounded by death, but he himself being unable to die. Jackman said, quote, "He realizes everyone he loves dies, and his whole life is full of pain, so it's better that he just escapes. He can't die really, he just wants to get away from everything." Jean in this movie is obviously just a ghost in Logan's mind, but I like to think of her as the cosmic Phoenix Force that might be speaking to Logan from some external cosmic realm. Because who's to say where our ghosts come from within or from without? This movie doesn't have the answers, none of us have the answers. So Logan gets shot at and thrown over the balcony and then tased by the Yakuza, and for a brief moment, the Silver Samurai flashes across the screen. He's seeing its future. Mariko saves him, the Mission to Mars room key wedged into this grunt's back, and she flings a knife at the others, a move that she will call back at the end of the movie. Logan wakes up with a light above him as he's being worked on by a veterinarian, which is similar to how we first met Jean Grey when he was lying on a medical table at the mansion and she was examining him under the bright lights. Now, Wolverine is somewhat an animal, so it's appropriate that a veterinarian would be the one to operate on him. Meanwhile, Viper meets with Harada in this alley where this random guy is wearing a hat with what looks like the Sam Raimi era Spider-Man logo. I don't think it's an overt reference to Spider-Man. They didn't just have to shoot this stuff in random places. And this would not be the first time this happened. Like one of the first shots in the Dark Knight film, when Joker's standing on the street corner waiting to be picked up, there is a poster for Spider-Man 3 in the background of that movie. Mariko brings Logan back to her family home outside of Nagasaki. She reveals that her grandfather Shingen left everything to her in his will. In the comics, Mariko did become head of the Yashida clan following Shingen's death. As their leader, she made the company more legitimate, but she still eventually went to hell because of her actions during that time. But we should note, if Shingen faked his death, did he really leave everything in his will to his granddaughter? My theory is no, that was just a lie he told her in order to cover up his death. And had he bequeathed his business empire directly to his son, he would have had a stronger rival to his power. We get a little moment where Logan cuts himself shaving, and it's such a refreshing change of pace from the bathroom mirror scene in X-Men Origins. Just reminds us that we're dealing with a real hero who's unnerved by the sight of his own blood. Logan revisits the exact site of the well that he was once in, running his finger along the manhole cover, reminding him of the lid that he used to shield Yashida. He looks up to see a 737 jet, reminding him of the B-29s that delivered the bomb. In a flashback with Yashida, Yashida offers a sword with 6 kanji characters engraved on it. These actually translate to never died, never aged, never destroyed. Something that applies to Wolverine and something that Yashida wants more than anything else. Actually, in the 2017 Logan film, we see that Logan kept this sword. Now I know the 2017 Logan film is kind of like set in an altered timeline. We don't really know, but he still has the sword. Logan and Mariko hook up. Now in 2013, all Marvel superhero movies began to gravitate in the orbit of the MCU, which despite gratuitous male nudity, have actually been pretty chaste when it comes to actual sex. After Tony Stark hooked up with Christina Everhart and Iron Man, it wouldn't be until the Eternals film and then She-Hulk where characters would actually have sex. So it's kind of nice just to see it here. Logan's dream of Jean Grey had given way to a nightmare of the Silver Samurai, which fuels my theory that these might not just be dreams, they might be cosmic premonitions sent by the Phoenix Force. Mariko tells him how her grandfather would tell her stories of the Kuzuri when she would have nightmares, saying the Kuzuri, which is Japanese for Wolverine, would protect her. This is really similar to Kayla Silverfox telling Logan the myth of the Wolverine and the moon in X-Men Origins. So you gotta wonder, is it just the case that in every country and in every culture there are women who f Wolverine and have their own folk tales about Wolverines to make him feel like, yeah, that could be me. Marika gets taken again, and Logan reunites with Yukio, who had a vision of Logan's death.
I see you on your back. There's blood everywhere. You're holding your own heart in your hand. It's not beating.
Now, she's probably envisioning the moment where he reaches his hand in his chest and kind of holds his heart in his hand. It is worth noting that when Logan does eventually die in the 2017 film, it is after he gets impaled on a tree stump and lying on his back. And what is he holding in his hand? The hand of Laura, the daughter figure who he learned to love, and we could see Laura as his heart. Logan confronts Noburo with his girls. He says that Yashida spent the company's fortunes on doctors and stockpiles of adamantium to prolong his life, and that his son, Mariko's Yashida's father, Shingen, lied to stockholders and became enraged when Yashida left the company to Mariko, so Shingen hired him to get Mariko out of the way, and Logan responds by defenestrating him.
How did you know there's a pool down there?
I didn't.
This kind of feels like an homage to the scene in Diamonds Are Forever.
Exceptionally fine shot.
I didn't know there was a pool down there.
Mariko is taken to her father, and Shingen talks about how he studied genetics and how certain genes skip generations. He's of course referring to his bitterness over his father's empire bypassing him to his daughter, but you gotta think this academic pursuit was probably encouraged by Ichiro to better understand mutant kind, which that was his obsession. The Black Clan, controlled by Harada and the Viper, take Mariko. Viper licks a pen and stabs Shingen in the neck. Logan and Yukio arrive to find the ransom note, because really they just want Logan to show up. Logan sees the empty jars that previously contained the robotic parasites, and he's like, whoa, maybe that's what's in me. He scans himself on the pin bed to find one of these latched to his heart, and he decides, you know what? I'm ripping this thing out. I'm so curious how this pin bed scanner works, because they do not show Logan's hand going over his chest when it is outside his body, but just like positioned over his chest. But it does show his hand as it's inside of his chest. So I suppose it's not that overhanging part that scans the body from overhead. It's really the pins underneath him that just kind of like vibrate through the body through a form of echolocation. And it only shows stuff that is like inside of the body that's positioned on these pins. We see that Shingen survived Viper's poison pin and dons new armor as he attacks Yukio and Logan. Logan pries out the robot, and yeah, this thing totally looks like one of the trackers that the agents put in Neo's belly in the Matrix, and his healing ability is restored. So Logan's wounds seal up, and he extends his claws at the last second to save Yukio from Shingen's stab. He throws Shingen and marches toward him, and Hugh Jackman is so yoked here. You can see one of his pecs twitches. Jesus! Shingen hits Logan with the classic samurai swipe across the midriff and pauses on the other side of them. We see this move a lot in movies, and I always love it. There's a similar move in Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. In Kill Bill, the bride similarly lunged across Oren Ishii and pauses on the other side of her, but in that case, obviously the cut was across the top of her head. Obi-Wan in Maul's final duel in Rebels had a similar slow, fast, slow draw. Now, Shingen is definitely the better fighter in this duel. He's just unfortunately going up against a guy who cannot die, but no excuse for how easy it was for Hawkeye to kill this guy in Endgame. I'll never forgive it. Now, before Logan goes after Mariko, we get a brief shot of the Silver Samurai blueprints. Again, this movie came out after Iron Man had skyrocketed up to the tier of Wolverine and Spider-Man of Marvel movie A-listers. So yeah, we definitely just have to look at these super suit designs and this movie's whole final act of the Silver Samurai armor to feel inspired by something from the world of Tony Stark and his enemies. Like, doesn't the Silver Samurai armor in this movie feel like Ironmonger, the first Iron Man? I think ultimately it's better and more meaningful than Ironmonger, but it's also just like, oh, clearly we are in a post-MCU world at this point. Back to his old self, Wolverine charges up via motorcycle toward the company facility on the mountainside of Yashida's birthplace. Logan runs into Harada and the Black Clan in this town.
Go yourself, pretty boy.
Ah, pretty boy. Logan would often call Cyclops pretty boy, especially in the animated series.
Anytime, pretty boy.
Harada poisons his arrows at Viper's direction, just like those asshole hunters did at the beginning, and Logan being halted by these archers with the cables pulling him back is a reference to the 1957 Japanese Macbeth adaptation, Throne of Blood. As he wakes up, he hears the voices of Jean, Mariko, and Kayla Silverfox, another woman he thought he failed to save, echoing through his mind. Viper now wears this all green outfit that's very reminiscent of her comics look. She explains that the completed Silver Samurai is made fully out of adamantium. And fun thing to note about this armor, it only has 3 fingers on each hand, but we learn later that this was actually designed to just be drills to absorb Wolverine's healing powers through the stumps of his claws. In the comics, there are actually 2 versions of the Silver Samurai figure, the comics version of Kenichiwa Harada, who's a skilled samurai with a tachyon blade, as well as his son, Shingen Harada, who possessed a technologically advanced suit of armor. This movie combines both versions of the Silver Samurai character and really redefines the suit as a life support system to prolong Yashida's life, which is really kind of like a grotesque reflection of his obsession with Wolverine's adamantium and the history of his country. And again, makes adamantium kind of like this cursed substance that Wolverine just cannot escape in his life. Harada knocks out Viper with an arrow, but the toxin only affects her skin layer, so she's able to peel it off like a snake, including her hair. Ugh. Logan fights the Silver Samurai, who chops off the 3 claws on his right hand. Logan wields the smoldering adamantium sword and uses it to lob off the armored head, saying, "Hey, bub." Meanwhile, Harada dies, and Yukio kills Viper, and Silver Samurai cuts off the other 3 claws on Wolverine's other hand and drills into the stumps, and raises Logan to his eye level to reveal Yashida's still alive inside the suit. It's a life support system. He faked his death, and that is why Yukio couldn't foresee it, because he didn't actually die. Now, you could say there is some justice in his plot to take an Allied soldier's immortality after the Americans dropped 2 atomic bombs, irradiating his Japanese soil, which led to him heroically rebuilding his country and desperately not wanting to see it fall to ruin after his death. But to take this out on Logan ain't American, bub. He's Canadian. He already prolonged your life by saving it twice. So Logan begins to age while Yashida reverts to his younger self. But notice the radiation scar on his cheek from the slit in that shield from the Nagasaki blast remains there on his face. Tragically, that's one scar that he can never reverse. Mariko saves the day, flinging one of Wolverine's severed adamantium claws into her grandfather, a move that we actually saw her do from that Love Hotel balcony, and Logan goes in with his OG bone claws to finish him off.
You asked me to come say goodbye. Sayonara.
I personally kind of see this as a reference to RoboCop, which also featured a man trying to kill a guy who's in a giant metal suit.
Sayonara, RoboCop.
Logan sees Jean one last time and comes to terms with what he did and the fact that he wants to live, and he tells her goodbye. He also says goodbye to Mariko in real life as he flies off with Yukio somewhere. Now, the mid-credits scene is set 2 years after this. In the airport, Logan sees a commercial for Trask Industries.
Keeping you healthy, keeping you safe. Trask Industries.
That is, of course, Bolivar Trask, creator of the Sentinels. In Days of Future Past, Peter Dinklage will play Bolivar Trask, who gets assassinated in 1973 by Mystique, which leads to her DNA being used to create the deadliest generation of Sentinels decades later. In this airport, Logan opts for the pat-down over going through the metal detector, but then all the metal starts shaking and we hear a familiar voice.
You can go ahead, sir.
I'll wait.
You could spot Magneto's familiar hat right behind Logan a second before this. Logan goes to stab him, but is stopped. I guess this means Magneto's powers are fully back after he got injected with a cure in The Last Stand. We did see him getting the powers back a little bit at the end of that film with the chessboard. Magneto comes with a warning.
There are dark forces, Wolverine. I want your help.
Logan very logically asks why you should trust him, and then everyone freezes, and you know what that means. It's a twofer!
Hello, Logan. You're not the only one with gifts.
I know. What? The last time we saw Charles, his body had been destroyed by Jean, but he transferred his consciousness to a comatose man under the care of Moira McTaggart. It's not clear how Charles got his old body back. In the comics, his body was destroyed once and his consciousness was transferred into a clone body with full use of his legs again even. But there's no reason to believe Moira had like a Patrick Stewart clone lying around. This does not make sense. And I think the filmmakers didn't really know what they were doing. The studio didn't know what they were doing. We all went into Days of Future Past expecting an answer to this, and then we ended up just kind of letting it go after the events of Days of Future Past retcon the Last Stand timeline anyway. Wolverine ends this movie with his bone claws, so how does he get his adamantium claws back at the beginning of Days of Future Past? Bryan Singer reportedly waved the question away when he's asked about it, saying that Wolverine now knows a guy who can manipulate metal, so I guess we're meant to assume that Magneto grafted adamantium back onto Wolverine's bone claws. But the grim reality is, this apparently stable present day that this movie is set within will very quickly collapse into a Terminator-style post-apocalyptic future in a matter of years. So the efforts that Wolverine will put in with Charles and Eric are going to lead to some dark days ahead. But I think it's interesting that Yukio in this movie suggests a darkness fell over her country. And since she can only see the future through a keyhole and can only see ways people are going to die, I think she's really referring to a darkness that will fall upon the entire planet from the Sentinels. Now, there is an alternate ending in the extended version that shows Yukio giving Wolverine his comic-accurate costume.
What's this?
Open it.
This is a yellow and brown suit created by John Byrne that first appeared in Uncanny X-Men 139. This is not the costume that Wolverine has seen wearing in Deadpool 3. That one is based on the Astonishing X-Men comics and it's yellow and blue. But speaking of Deadpool 3, onto the Danger Room, where we're going to discuss some possible Deadpool 3 spoilers. If you don't want to know, feel free to stop watching the video now. Okay, we could not confirm the source of this. It looked like it was like a Japanese website, but Rila Fukushima's version of Yukio from this movie is speculated to return in Deadpool 3. But that's going to be really weird because Shioli Kutsuna's Yukio from Deadpool 2 is most certainly going to return along with the rest of the Deadpool 2 cast. So I don't really know what the plan is there. And since Charles's return after the events of X-Men The Last Stand remains perhaps, in my opinion, the most confusing plot hole in the X-Men film franchise, I feel like Wade and Logan have to reference it in some way. Okay, next we're gonna break down 2014's X-Men Days of Future Past. The best way to support new Rockstars is to grab one of these Multiverse Tour shirts inspired by Deadpool and T-Swift. If you live in the LA area, please come hang out with us on February 15th. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network. Big thanks to Gina Ippolito for her help writing the script. I'm Eric Voss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.